Good morning. My name is John Honker with Magellan Advisors, and we're excited today to present to you a bit of information about how rural broadband is being deployed in Texas and how it impacts Texas electric co-ops. We first wanted to extend a warm note of thanks to Texas electric cooperatives and all of the members for making this possible. And we hope to share some very valuable information with you today on how co-ops in Texas can solve rural broadband challenges. Today, we're going to be working with myself and Jessica Zufalo. My name is John Honker. I am the Rural Project Executive for the state of Texas. Work throughout the state on many rural broadband projects and have really deployed over 50 municipal broadband and co-op broadband networks across the U.S. over the past 15 years. With me, I have Jessica Zufalo, who's going to introduce herself.
Good afternoon and good morning, everybody. My name is Jessica Zufalo, and I come to you from over 28 years of experience in the rural broadband sector. I used to be the Deputy Administrator for the USDA's Rural Utility Service, and also spent about 5 years, most recently at the Universal Service Administrative Company, administering all the federal subsidy programs for rural underserved communities. So thank you for having us both.
Great, thanks, Jessica. Just a little bit about Magellan Advisors. For those of you that don't know us, we work throughout the state of Texas, and we're most known for helping rural communities deploy broadband networks in unserved and underserved areas. We work with over 400 co-ops and electric providers across the state and across the union. And over that time period, we've helped them deploy over 50 networks across the U.S. and in some of the most rural and challenging terrain in the U.S., with over 1 million homes now built with broadband fiber and over about $1 billion invested in broadband across both direct investments made by co-ops and muni utilities and through about $400 million in grant funding through federal agencies and state funds. Magellan's really a turnkey provider. We've been around for about 15 years. We are very much turnkey broadband planning, engineering, implementation, and funding is really a core part of what we do. So we really help customize funding packages, grants, and loans for our clients, and then help them implement the networks under those programs. We work with all the major funding agencies, and we're really kind of on the inside with the experience Jessica and the rest of the grants team brings to Magellan. We can help you design specific programs that give you the best chance of an award and help you then manage that turnkey program to build networks, really for organizations that are challenged to do that today, right? In the co-op and the muni space, we know how hard it is. We know that the challenges of actually standing up a broadband fiber to the home network and wireless network and actually operating that. And we're really here for you every step of the way to give you the services that you need to be able to do that successfully. So that really is in terms of engineering, construction management, implementation of electronics, and the build of the final network, and even providing services to rural customers. We help you every step of the way with a partner that's been doing it for over 15 years. So some of our Texas utility customers, we've been working in Texas for about 12 out of the 15 years, had a lot of success. Probably our latest project was building the city of Mont Belvieu, which is a combination rural and urban build, which now brings fiber to the home to every home and business within Mont Belvieu, and today has almost 70% take rate. Mont Belvieu was noted in the Houston Chronicle last year as potentially having the fastest internet in Texas. So we were very proud to help them through the entire process of engineering, design, implementation, and even into ongoing operations of that network. So I'm going to turn it over to Jessica to talk a little bit about what we're hearing from members and the co-op community.
Thank you, John. So we've spent a lot of time talking to cooperatives across rural America and the consumers that they serve, their member consumers, and a lot of things, some key themes have come up in our discussions. and in our research in working with rural communities. One is that COVID has made the lack of affordable, reliable broadband such a critical need. And without broadband service, it is really just so critical for these communities to be able to survive and thrive, particularly during the pandemic. So across Texas, we've heard from cooperatives where broadband is so important to their members. In addition, access to state and federal funding is really, really vital for co-ops. Infrastructure is so needed in underserved communities in Texas and in tribal communities as well. And so what we've been hearing in our meetings with cooperative members of TEC is that in order to successfully build out, broadband is so important, and funding to support their infrastructure needs is vital. The third item that we've been hearing about a lot is the need for collaborative partnerships with community-based organizations, with the farm bureaus, with local municipal entities, and regional councils of governments. Is so important for co-ops to really realize their infrastructure needs for infrastructure and broadband specifically. So leveraging those partnerships is so important for cost-effective deployments, and to be able to do some kind of agreements and collaborative approaches towards costs and infrastructure leveraging is so vital. Next slide. John, so at this point, I wanted to talk about COVID-19 and really specifically what's happening on the ground. So rural communities impacted by the pandemic really do need reliable broadband. And this is something that is, clearly not new. This is a theme that comes up in every single meeting and discussion that we have with TEC members and with cooperatives nationwide. So in order for co-op communities to really sustain and continue to be able to survive throughout this pandemic, they need distance learning, they need telehealth applications and services. And for folks to be able to continue to work and earn a living, they need to be able to engage their employers at home and be able to telework. So important. In addition, local and state officials truly recognize the need and the lack of broadband. It is such a huge issue, such a big issue for Texas. Number one priority, we hear from the Texas congressional delegation about this. We hear about this from statewide leaders across Texas and local leaders. So many are looking to utilize existing co-op immunity assets to bring broadband service. So again, as I said in the previous slide, utilizing existing infrastructure assets, towers, poles, ducts, conduit, and municipal assets to really bring broadband is so important for a unified solution that makes sense for rural communities. And Texas community leaders and broadband advocates are starting to really turn up their voices around the need for broadband and for an adoption of a statewide broadband plan. We're starting to hear a lot about this, and I think that the state is poised really to embrace some kind of a plan that incorporates a variety of funding opportunities at the state and federal level, and for Texas to really be embracing ways to provide funding for communities to do this. So adoption strategies, deployment strategies, and funding are starting to coalesce around the potential for a statewide broadband plan, which is really, really, I think, something that people are starting to talk about more openly and actively. Next slide.
And to add what Jessica was saying around the collaboration, we're really seeing that rural communities in Texas are poised to aggregate, to band together to actually achieve their broadband goals. And this is something that's really important in such a large state as Texas, and which with so much land and such a large geography. We have to practice the concept of aggregating demand, right? Bringing multiple rural communities together to create a sizable project that has viable economics. I mean, when we look at a lot of the co-op members, that have 3, 4, 5 meters per mile in their distribution plants, it's very, very challenging to build broadband networks and make them economically viable. So what we really need to be looking at is ways to aggregate, rural demand with some suburban demand and make regional projects more viable than rural projects on their own. We also need to look at opportunities to utilize emerging wireless technologies, particularly in the CBRS spectrum, to deploy wireless where fiber isn't necessarily going to be economically feasible, with the path to getting to fiber later on down the road, when there may be other electric improvements, other grid automation improvements, and grid mod improvements that need fiber, where that can be expanded over time. Co-ops are definitely being encouraged by local and regional economic planners to look at utilizing those assets. There's a major project in Eastern Texas, Deep East Texas, that is looking at how the co-ops and the Council of Governments and the munis and counties can all work together to utilize infrastructure that's out there and available. When you're a co-op, you have to think about the assets that you have to start changing the economics of broadband. Those assets go a long way in terms of your substations, not necessarily inside of your secure areas of your substations, but outside, any land that's available, any existing towers that are available at your substations for microwave connectivity. Those can be repurposed for broadband in a secure way that's not interfering with SCADA or any of your telemetry data. And the trade-off with not doing that is, well, you have to find commercial towers, and you have to find or you have to build where it becomes very expensive to do so. So patchworking these together and bringing these assets together as a region between co-ops can often be a very, very valuable opportunity. And lastly, again, looking at the opportunities between co-ops and community organizations for funding requirements or for funding opportunities is really key, right? We're seeing a lot of traction happen at the federal level and at the state level at Texas General Land Office for new programs coming out to help or to position rural co-ops, cities, counties, and their munis all together to potentially apply for funding in a collaborative way. And that funding is really important, particularly for the rural components of these projects. So we're going to turn it over to Jessica now, who's going to talk about some of the key funding opportunities that are coming down the pike.
Thanks, John. So as we continue to have these discussions with TEC members, again, a huge theme continues to permeate, which is how do we manage our risk and how do we finance these deployments? So there's a number of funding mechanisms that Magellan really tries to bring to light and explain the possibilities and financing infrastructure. Obviously, the USDA Rural Utility Service is an ideal place for financing of infrastructure through this Smart Utility Loan Program, which we're going to talk about, as well as the RUS Reconnect Loan and Grant Program for broadband infrastructure. Then there's a number of USDA rural development programs that are managed by USDA Rural Development in Texas by the State Director, Ed Hargett, who his team really do such a terrific job across the state in helping communities, helping entities think about their business planning and in meeting the feasibility and the economic sustainability of their objectives. Community Facilities Loan and Grant Program is such an important program, and I always bring this program up because it can cover the cost of equipment, it can cover the cost of smart meters, it can cover the cost of inside wiring, and it is really just a terrific catch-all that can be brought to a project that also includes another RUS or federal funding component. Then we have been really diving into the Department of Housing and Urban Development, Community Development Block Grant Programs, their disaster mitigation project grants, which are great and very extensive, but they're certainly a little different than the RUS financing. And of course, the FCC's Universal Service Programs, which I used to help administer through the E-rate program and the rural, the RDOF, which is coming down the pike. And I know many Texas cooperatives have submitted their short form applications to be part of the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund. But there are other types of financing beyond RDOF that I always try to stress for cooperatives. You don't always have to go through RDOF. There's other ways to cover the costs and manage the cost risk and really the reporting risks and the regulatory risks associated with RDOF. Next slide. So what I wanted to do is just highlight two programs specifically and drill down just very quickly for all of you today. We are always available to answer questions on all the other funding mechanisms that I listed in the previous slide on slide 9. And our doors are always open to answer and to think strategically about how any of you can apply for the funds. So one of them is the Reconnect program. And this is such an important flagship program for USDA, RUS. In many ways, I talk about Reconnect as the 2.0, if you will, of some of the broadband loan and grant program dollars that have been administered. There's $550 million currently for loan grant and loan grant combination awards. With this program, you can either apply depending on the need and your application, apply for either 50% loan, 50% grant, or depending on how you can propose and demonstrate true need, you can apply for 100% grant, which is quite rare for USDA, but it's definitely been funded. Or you can come up with a different type of structure where it's all loan and maybe a piece of it is grant. So the program is highly competitive. Many projects have been financed across the country through the Reconnect program, certainly some in Texas as well. And an important point for all of you to be aware of is that community participation is really, really important for these projects. So as John discussed earlier, you need to really demonstrate that you've done a lot of outreach and coordination with the community and the region, and getting support from local governments is really, really important. So I want to maybe stress that and make sure that that is something that is really on the forefront of your minds, is that regionalism and localism in terms of bringing together the community support is key. And certainly the last point here is really, really poignant for Texas. Points are awarded for states with a current broadband plan, and Texas does not have one. So that also should sort of, energize people who are listening to this webinar that this would be an ideal, area for additional points if Texas were to have a broadband plan. Certainly that, I think, is a secondary motivating factor for all of you listening today. Next slide. So the next program I want to talk about is the RUS Smart Utility Loan Authority. And this is really a creative program that USDA RUS has put forth that I think is very, very intriguing for the TEC membership. As many of you may have seen, the RUS put out an announcement on September 14th that highlights the fact that 10% of a number of USDA rural development programs, 10% of a long list of programs can be used for broadband, both wholesale and retail broadband deployment and broadband services for communities. And so for the RUS Smart Utility Loan Authority, this is really kind of the bedrock of what USDA is trying to do to promote and encourage broadband integration in their projects, starting with this program. The 10% of rural electric loans can be used for retail or wholesale broadband service. Really exciting. The focus of this loan authority is smart grid. So the entire project must be dedicated and focused primarily on grid modernization, on substation automation, on AMI, on AMR, any kind of smart utility, application is really the thrust of this program. And 10% of that can be used for fiber or a fiber wireless hybrid solution, again, which John mentioned on the CBRS side is really, really exciting for Texas, and we'd be thrilled to talk to you about CBRS and how that's being used by cooperative systems nationally. So we wanted to make sure folks really spend time thinking about this, this financing opportunity that USDA has put forth, because again, it really encourages TEC members to think creatively about utilizing RUS for broadband infrastructure, utilizing specifically the RUS loan program to do so, and taking advantage of very, very, very attractive interest rates today in the market. So we're here to answer your questions on this, but I'm really excited to talk about some of the neat opportunities coming down the pike on the federal financing side. Next slide.
Great. Well, thank you, Jessica. We appreciate the time today with the TEC members, and please reach out to us for any questions you have on broadband in Texas in terms of funding, engineering, design, implementation. Magellan's been here in Texas for 10 to 15 years, and we look forward to helping more co-ops bridge the digital divide that we know is so rampant in rural Texas communities. So again, you can reach us at GIG, that's G-I-G, at Magellan-advisors.com, or give us a ring at 888-960-5299. Thank you all again, and we appreciate your time.